the right to transact actually precedes all other rights. And I think when you don't have that sort of authentic ability to transact and have that freedom, I think it impinges on the rest of your freedoms. It sort of shuts them down to a degree. I hope the Bitcoin community engages in what I think is actually the most important fight that we could possibly wage, which is to get inserted into the Bill of Rights of freedom to transact. Because I think when the framers of our Constitution put our Constitution together, there was no technology by which you could even imagine that anybody could stop your ability to transact. I think had there been technology that they could see that would be threatened, I absolutely think that would be in our Bill of Rights, the freedom to transact.
Greetings and salutations, my fellow plebs. My name is Walker, and this is the Bitcoin Podcast. Bitcoin continues to create new blocks every 10 minutes, and the value of one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. If you are listening to this right now, remember, you are still early. Find me on Nostr at primal.net/Walker and this podcast at primal.net/Titcoin. On X, YouTube, and Rumble, just search at Walker America. And find this podcast on X and Instagram at Titcoin Podcast. Head to the show notes for sponsor links, head to substack.com/@WalkerAmerica to get episodes emailed to you, and head to bitcoinpodcast.net for everything else. Without further ado, let's get into this Bitcoin talk. All right, Kent, welcome. Happy Monday to you. How's it going?
It's good, man. Happy Monday to you too.
Yeah, I'm stoked to be able to chat with you, and I just met Nathan, right, on your team, running marketing at the BPI Bitcoin Policy Summit. Always interesting to see Bitcoiners. I felt like there was like Bitcoiners out of their natural habitat to a certain extent in DC, but then at the same time, the realization is like, oh, Bitcoiners are everywhere. Like Bitcoin is a Trojan horse, but also Bitcoiners are individual Trojan horses just infiltrating everything. Like you never know where you're going to find Bitcoiners, and I think that's a beautiful thing.
Oh, it is. And Bitcoiners in suits, inside of suits themselves, definitely does not come as a natural image in my head. But I was glad to be a sponsor of that event. Glad Nathan was there for us. And I'm glad that we're there influencing policy because, as much as we don't like politics, particularly the Bitcoin community doesn't matter. It's the impacts of politics are going to affect us.
Yeah, it's like you don't care about politics. Politics cares about you, though. That cliche is very much true. I mean, and you see it today. I think the voting might be happening today, but there's Cynthia Lummis was talking about, like I just saw just before we hopped on here, getting rid of like this double taxation treatment for Bitcoin miners specifically, where it's like right now the Bitcoin miners are basically, you're taxed when you actually discover a block, like you're taxed when you mine the Bitcoin, but then you're also taxed if you need to sell any of that Bitcoin. So which is just kind of like insane. Like I don't believe gold miners are getting taxed when they are pulling the gold out of the ground and then also when they sell the gold. It just like, people drilling for oil aren't getting taxed when they pull the oil out of the ground. It's like, no, it's when you sell it. But I mean, I also think we should just get rid of all capital gains tax on Bitcoin, but it's a different story. The de minimis limit that Cynthia Lummis has also talked about is at least a decent start, but I'd like to see it all ripped out. And I'm curious if as a miner, you have any additional insights on kind of that double taxation. Like that just seems ludicrous to me.
It is ludicrous, and I think these sorts of policies only exist because Bitcoin has been relatively unknown and a lack of education. So, like podcasts like this and just the whole, podcasting arm and education arm of Bitcoin, I think has been necessary to reach Capitol Hill to get this across to people that, hey, this is a commodity and there's no reason to treat it like it's something that you can just double tax. I mean, didn't we have the Boston Tea Harbor over double taxation, or is that just me?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that, and to be fair, that was like a 2% tax on tea. And look how far we've come. It's like, starting a revolution over a 2% tax on tea. And now we're like, oh, you want to take like 40 to 50% of the fruits of my labor? Yeah, go ahead, daddy government. Like, I won't revolt. I don't know. We're like,
do it twice.
Yeah, seriously, and do it twice. It reminds me of like that, that meme of like the wolf and then like the, like a little pug or something, and it's like, like what are you? Like like you descended from me. This is just embarrassing. But yeah, I think we're turning a corner. Perhaps things will get better.
Well, I'd like to think so. And I'm glad that BPI exists to put on those types of events up on the Hill, because I think that's the only way that we get better with our current apparatus. I don't think that revolution is the right call today, and I would like to see a whole lot more of a intolerant minority from the voices of us in the Bitcoin community to affect change. Because I don't know if you've heard Balaji's like breakdown of kind of the political tribes right now in the U.S., but I think it's accurate from where I sit. And granted, I sit someplace outside the U.S., so I'm sort of obsessed looking in at but I'm outside the glass, the fishbowl here. But you've got red blue, which is what everybody talks about all the times. But he also classifies the tech bros from Silicon Valley as the grays, and then the orange is the other community that is impacting change right now. And I've been talking about it for a little while now, a few years, and I think Team Orange is the intransient minority that like Nasib Taleb talks about, that the vocal like 10% that can get massive policy change through just because we're intransigent. We just don't give up. We're just going to keep chanting the same thing over and over again and sort of forcing politics to go around us. And I think that there's nobody else that has a stronger belief in the political system than I think the Bitcoin community does.
I mean, and we've certainly seen the Bitcoin community's ability to like materially affect politics in the US and around the world. Like, and I think it comes down to like passion and obsession and just a touch of autism as well, which allows for that relentless focus on these things. Because it's like most people, you realize, don't actually like the amount that they care about an issue is pretty like it's skin deep. Like you take even the really hot button issues, like really people don't care beyond the sound bites that they parrot. Most of them, like if you actually start having a conversation, asking them and trying to dig a little bit deeper, like why do you think that? Like what fundamentally informs that view of yours? And most of the time they haven't actually thought about that. Bitcoiners have thought and talked and studied a lot in terms of why they believe the things that they do, why they hold certain opinions to like very, very, very strongly and will not compromise them. And I think having to your point, that little minority, but that's incredibly vocal, incredibly driven, and very importantly, has an increasingly outsized economic impact. Like that should not be like understated in this case. It's our purchasing power as Bitcoiners is only growing, and it is growing exponentially faster than the purchasing power of basically anyone else.
Yeah, I've to that point, it was last cycle where I heard a really wild statistic, but it's stuck with me. It was something like, and so I think it should be researched, right? So don't take what I'm saying with a grain of take it with a grain of salt. But directionally, it's accurate, and that's that when Bitcoin passes $200,000, the majority of billionaires on the planet will be Bitcoiners. And when you think about that, it's mind blowing. So again, that number may be off, right? But there is a certain price point at which that will be true. And when that is true, you think about what are the values of this cohort that is suddenly making up the billionaire class, the dominant majority of the billionaire class, and what impact is that going to have on the entire political, sociological system that we live within? I don't know, but I don't think that that's a bad change, no matter what exactly it happens from that change.
No, I agree. And American HODL put out a great AI generated video today. Kind of like, I don't know if you saw it. He posted it on Noster. It's quite a banger. But it's basically the idea of, it's making some jokes about Bitcoin treasury companies, paper Bitcoin, that kind of thing. But the ultimate point of the video is like, who's Trojan horsing who here? Like, even when it comes to Wall Street, when it comes to the government, some people like bemoan the fact that these entities that we eschew, like the government, like Wall Street, they're getting involved with Bitcoin. But it's like, one, that was always going to happen if Bitcoin was going to be successful. You don't have to like it, but it was always going to be a natural result of Bitcoin's success. If Bitcoin wasn't successful, we wouldn't see that because it would be insignificant. Nobody would care. But two, to your point about like, what does it start to look like when economic dominance is on the side of Bitcoiners? It's, again, who's Trojan horsing who? Like Bitcoin, you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. Whatever sort of, these sayings we want to go with. It's like Bitcoin is powerful because it is resistant to change and resistant to manipulation. Human beings are much more willing to change. They are much more susceptible to manipulation. But if that manipulation, if that incentive structure is a good one, is contributing to positive sum games, it's very exciting to think what the world may look like and how some of these institutions may be changed fundamentally for the better because they're forced to without even realizing it. Like that's, to me, that's just, it's fascinating. And it's one of the things that gives me a lot of hope as we go into the future.
Well, it's interesting because as I think about it, I grew up on the West Coast in the U.S. and I watched the hippies during my childhood become the man in my older age, right? Not that I'm that old at this point, but I wonder if history repeats in a similar way, where the Bitcoin community is vocal in trying to tear down the existing institutions and rebuild them into something better. I sort of wonder if the Bitcoiners are the institutions of the future, or wind up the dominant majority within the institutions of the future. I don't think that that's a bad thing, but I think that it is something that we have to watch out for as a community. I think there is a desire to sort of tear things down. There's an impulse, at least within our community. And I don't think that's a wrong impulse. Just think it needs to be carefully shielded and not turn into the negative, because it's really hard to build things, and it's very easy to tear them down. And I do think that we need institutions to help us. As much as I love the anarchist dream, I just don't think that we're evolved enough as a species to all be able to maintain our own rule book and manage ourselves all that effectively. And so I think I'm glad to see the Bitcoin community getting involved with the political level. And I think as long as we maintain control of our own coins, I really think it's that simple of a metric. As long as we maintain control of our own coins, I don't see how the existing system co-ops us. But that's my take at this point.
Yeah, I mean, an institution is not inherently bad. Like, an institution is not necessarily bad. It's just a collection of people who get together and agree to basically to centralize a little bit of thought or of economic power or mind share, whatever you want to call it. Now, incentives matter, right? So institutions that get really, really, really big and really, really bloated, which is like what we have now, the incentives start to warp. And we have a fundamentally warped system from its base layer because our money is fundamentally broken. But like, to your point, it's, Bitcoiners have the opportunity to build better institutions that last and are built on a sounder money and a sounder set of incentives. And I think that is like, I want Bitcoiners to build institutions. We don't have to do things the same way. And, something is not necessarily just the idea of getting together to solve problems is not inherently bad just because the people that, the boomers that did it before created more problems than they solved. And I rag on boomers a lot, but there are so many amazing boomers out there too. So like, shout out to them, and you know who you are. The Larry Lepards of the world, the Bob Burnett's, the George Bodines, like so many incredible boomers I've met through Bitcoin who I'm like, see, not everyone is lost. No matter what age you are, there's always hope. But I'm curious, Ken. I want to get into kind of your background a little bit, because you mentioned you were in the U.S. You are no longer in the U.S. Can you just give like a little bit of background of who are you? How did you get here today to be working on Bitcoin mining?
Yeah, I think everybody's got an interesting orange pill journey. Mine is more circuitous than most, though. So I worked for about a decade in rooftop solar on the West Coast. Was operating a nine-figure sales software construction company, publicly traded, competing with the likes of Elon Musk's cousins, and it was quite quite a driven sort of career, and a new CEO was named by the board, and I realized that I needed to fulfill a lifelong dream of travel, and so I had enough pennies in the piggy bank that I took off, threw on a backpack, and traveled the world for a couple of years, and on that 2-year sabbatical, I fell in love with a Portuguese woman and Bitcoin. Both happened, ironically, in Peru, where I now live, but she was Portuguese, and so I wound up in Portugal in 2016 and lived there until early 2023 when we moved to Peru for my wife's work. But in 2021, after trying my hand, so between 2016 when I got to Portugal and 2021, I was trying my hand at all sorts of entrepreneurial ideas while living in Portugal. And the environment there was not as entrepreneurial as the U.S. We'll put it that way. There's a lot more red tape and a lot less inertia, a lot more difficult to get things off the ground. So after trying my hand at a few different activities, of course, trading, mining from home, tried Bitcoin ATMs, was even trying to fund renewable energy projects with some blockchain technology. But I realized I picked up a copy of Jeff Booth's The Price of Tomorrow, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, you idiot, you have this energy background, why aren't you in mining? So I discovered Sazmining through a mutual connection, the founder of it, and joined up with the founder. We raised some pre-seed capital to go build a mining as a service platform. So think SaaS, software as a service, but for mining. And we started building. That was mid-2021, and we got operational, had our first data center January 2023, and we've been growing like gangbusters. So our first year over year, we had about 350% growth, and we're expected to do the same this year. And I didn't realize that what we set out to do was anything all that innovative. It just seemed obvious to me when I was trying to mine from home in Portugal that, I just wanted to be able to go buy a mining rig, have somebody else plug it in, manage that for me, and I received the Bitcoin, and I was happy to pay for that service. And I didn't seem particularly complicated, but nobody had done that. Nobody had just made that Web 2.0 product. And so we set out to build that. So in a nice, easy, simple way with a couple clicks, you buy a mining rig, you can look at the specs of it. We get it deployed in one of our data centers, of which we've got 3, one in Wisconsin, one in Paraguay, and one in Norway. And the sats go to your wallet. So they're all wild, the sats that we generate. And we don't mark up the hardware or electricity or cost pass-through on those two items. And instead, we take a share of the block reward, just 15% when the pool pays it out.
Can you explain that concept of wild in terms of the Bitcoin, as opposed to
surveilled, right? So when you acquire your Bitcoin, you've basically got 2 ways of doing it. Either you're going to buy them or you're going to earn them, right? And if you're going to go buy your Bitcoin, that's where the surveillance state steps in. You're going to have to give over everything but your firstborn child to be able to actually purchase those sats. And what we've discovered is that when people purchase their sats and they pull them off the exchange, it's like the surveillance camera sort of comes with them and sits on their shoulder, and nobody really feels at liberty to use their sats, right? It's just uh-oh, if I use these, how do I manage the reporting? What are the tax consequences? Yada, yada. And what we see from our customer base is they're actually using their sats, right? Because they've been generated, they're wild sats, right? Bitcoin mining is the only way to generate Bitcoin. That seems like a very simple statement, but I found the more I think about it, the more profound it is. And as a result of you generating your own Bitcoin, you're getting them fresh off the network, and they're wild, and they don't have any history related to them. So people just feel more at liberty to utilize them as they see fit. And for me, I actually see the more wild sats that we get out into the economy, the more the circular economy is going to naturally just develop, because people don't have that psychological friction that comes with surveilled sats.
So there's no mandate on you guys. I'm not sure where you're domiciled in terms of the company itself, but there's no mandate on you guys to do any sort of ridiculous KYC or anything for your customers. They can actually get KYC-free sats.
Well, as of right now, I don't like to say that exactly because I don't want to draw unwarranted attention to myself.
Fair enough.
But if you
Fair
think
enough.
about what we do, we sell hardware and we maintain hardware. If anything, we're much more akin to a property management company, right? And so, do you know a property management company that really has to KYC you? Um, I, I mean, they may, but that's sort of optional, right? Like we're not doing any money transmitting. We're not, people don't give me dollars and I give them Bitcoin, right? They give me dollars and I get them a mining rig with that, and then it's their Bitcoin. So we're able to just sort of work around like all the issues that force exchanges into the regulatory apparatus. And it's not because we're trying to do anything shady. We're just able to take advantage of, standard business regulations that are out there. And we're a property management service, not an exchange.
No, and I mean, technically, even in the U.S., the IRS classifies Bitcoin as property. So, so there you go. I'm curious too. I mean, I'd love to just kind of touch for a second on that KYC element, because I think it's actually really important for folks to understand. We've seen so many different data breaches, like this Coinbase one recently was quite high profile. I think KYC AML is fundamentally just an absolutely misguided and ridiculous kind of regulatory framework. Like, one, it doesn't work, because if it did work, it would work. Like, it would stop money laundering, but it doesn't. It's like it's like less than 1% of, laundered money is actually identified, and like 99 point something percent of the money laundered in the world is done through the, traditional fiat systems. So it doesn't work, and it just creates these massive, massive honeypots. I mean, like, do you think? I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think the average person probably thinks twice about it. I know Bitcoiners do, but I feel like most people are just kind of like, well, this is just what you have to do now. Like, how? It's kind of sad that we got to that point where people are just resigned to the fact that, yep, I guess I've just got to, give up, my firstborn child basically to be able to do basic financial services. Like, it's truly absurd. If you've accepted that we're living through the fourth turning, then it's time to get yourself some Bitcoin and then go to bitbox.swiss/walker and use the promo code WALKER for 5% off the easy-to-use, fully open-source Bitcoin-only Bitbox02 hardware wallet. Then get your Bitcoin off the exchange into your own self-custody and prepare yourself for the chaos that is to come. The world is going pretty wild right now, but Bitcoin is ripping, and your stack will soon be worth a heck of a lot more in fiat value than it is today, as every currency around the world hyperinflates. So now is the perfect time to get your security locked down tight with Bitbox. I really want to emphasize that the Bitbox02 is easy as hell to use, whether you're brand new to Bitcoin, it's your first time setting up a hardware wallet, or you are a well-seasoned psychopath. It is Bitcoin only and fully open source. No need to trust me. You can head to their GitHub and verify that for yourself. When you go to bitbox.swiss/walker and use the promo code WALKER, not only do you get 5% off, but you also help support this podcast. So thank you. If you're stuck spending dollars, at least stop earning dirty fiat rewards. Use Fold to earn Bitcoin on everyday purchases and regular expenses, like groceries, bills, travel, home improvement. I literally just earned 2,203 sats buying a $100 Amazon gift card on Fold. You don't even need to use the Fold card itself if you don't want to. You can connect your favorite credit card and double dip with Bitcoin rewards on merchant offers. Or go all in. Make Fold the center of your personal finances. Buy, earn, save, and even get paid in Bitcoin with Fold. Head to the link in the show notes to get started with the ultimate savings toolkit, or go directly to use.foldapp.com/r/walker and get yourself $10 in Bitcoin when you sign up.
It is, and the the conspiracy theorist in me wants to go to, hey, this is by design, right? But I try not to go there. I just feel like it is sort of death by a thousand paper cuts, though, right? It's like we've been we've been slowly lulled into this sense that there is no privacy. And just to back up for a minute about Sazmining, so we don't require anything other than to be able to contact you, our customer. So whatever you want to call yourself for first name, but we need a phone number, we need an email address. So that is what we collect, but that's just more, I need to be able to communicate with you. We tried actually not having phone numbers, and then we realized we couldn't actually reach our customers, and that was problematic. So then we sort of forced, like, you have to give me a phone number because I need to contact you when I need to contact you. So to be fair, if somebody came to me, I would have those records, right? And they could get those records from me. But it's very different than, where you do the face scan and the whole bit that's typical of KYC exchanges now. And it just feels somewhat diabolical to have that level of invasion. I hate it personally, and the one that really goads me is when people always say like, "Hey, like I have nothing to hide. Why should I care?" And I'm just like, "Well, why do you have bathroom doors or blinds? I'll take those for free off you and resell them and make a buck if you don't mind." But so I think as Bitcoiners, we do need to drive back that privacy is important because actually the way the metaphor or the analogy I like to use most often is almost all of us have walked into a room and not noticed that there's a surveillance camera in it, right? And then out of the corner of your eye, you notice there's a surveillance camera, and every time you do, your body changes. Like as soon as you know you're being watched, your behavior changes. And just that simple experience, I think, goes to show why privacy is important. It's not that anybody has anything to hide. It's just we know when we're being watched, we behave differently, and we don't behave as our authentic selves. And I think it's important that we are able to behave as our authentic selves.
I mean, there's countless studies. I'm forgetting the big one, or like the famous one now, but it's literally been proven that the presence of an observer materially changes the behavior of the observed. Like this is just a fact. Whether or not you think that you are changing your behavior, and I think that's actually a fascinating way to look at it. That you're, even if you don't realize it, you are when it comes to Bitcoin, like you are doing things differently than you would if you knew no one was watching. And not that you're going to do bad. Again, it's not like you're going to do bad things. For some reason, we've got the idea of innocent until proven guilty in our legal systems. And yet when it comes to anytime you want to touch your money, it's guilty until proven innocent. And also not just guilty, but we're classifying you and treating you the same as we do drug dealers and terrorists and like child traffickers. Like that's insane that a normal person who has probably never been arrested, doesn't have any marks on their record, is somehow treated the same as the worst criminals. And guess what? They don't even catch the worst criminals. Like that's the other thing. Like it just makes the lives of ordinary people way worse, way more cumbersome. And again, creates these honeypots where actual criminals then can go and take advantage of you. Like it screws the law-abiding citizen on so many levels. And I mean, I would love to see that regime abolished. Sadly, I don't think we're getting there anytime soon, but at least there are ways for us to act a little bit more freely thanks to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think listening to RFK Jr. when he was campaigning for president last year, he said something that really struck with me, that the right to transact actually precedes all other rights. And I think when you don't have that sort of authentic ability to transact and have that freedom, I think it impinges on the rest of your freedoms. It sort of shuts them down to a degree. And so I actually think one of I hope the Bitcoin community engages in what I think is actually the most important fight that we could possibly wage, which is to get inserted into the Bill of Rights of freedom to transact. Because I think when the framers of our Constitution put our Constitution together, there was no technology by which you could even imagine that anybody could stop your ability to transact. I think had there been technology that they could see that would be threatened, I absolutely think that would be in our Bill of Rights, the freedom to transact. But because that couldn't even be conceptualized at that point, it's not included in our Constitution. And to me, as soon as I heard RFK Jr. say that, I was like, he didn't advocate for a new amendment to the Bill of Rights. I'm saying that, but he did mention that. And it was like, yeah, if you don't have the right to transact, how are you going to go buy the sign to go go, demonstrate with? How are you going to go buy the gun to show your Second Amendment rights? How are you going to do all these things to actually protest if you can't actually buy anything? And so I actually think that that's probably the most important hill for us as a Bitcoin community to die on, because the U.S. enshrines so many of the property rights that are important for the entire planet. And because we don't have that one, the government's able to constantly push in on it. And I think that threatens all of our long-term liberty without having something substantially and legislatively put in place to protect our right to transact.
I would certainly support that amendment. And it's one of those things where you can very easily prove that this right is kind of primary, in the sense that what's the first thing that any dictator does, or any leader of Canada, let's say, when they want to shut down a peaceful protest of truckers, what do? They cut you off from the financial system. They cut off your ability to transact freely. That's the first thing they do. Like, it's the first thing that a dictator, an autocrat, Fidel Castro's son, will turn to is that cutting off the freedom to transact. And so, yeah, I would love to see. I don't know if we're there yet in terms of that as a constitutional amendment, but I hope that I think we're on the right track, at least. Like, we're moving in the right direction, I hope. Countries implementing CBDCs, probably less so. But it looks like for now we'll just maybe get some private CBDCs, not Fed issued ones. So let's see. But switching gears a little bit, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was misconceptions around mining. Because I think there's misconceptions on the normie, the pre-coiner side. Of course, they've been fed bad information for a while. But I think there's also probably misconceptions on the side of Bitcoiners. So maybe, wherever side of that you'd like to start on, can we walk through just like some of those misconceptions? What are the things people get wrong about Bitcoin mining?
Yeah, this is probably my favorite soapbox to get on, Walker. So you're going to have to bear with me here for a minute.
I'm ready.
So I think first, let me give some history that I think is not talked about enough within the Bitcoin community. So if you go back to OGs up until like 2012, most of them acquired their Bitcoin through mining, right? And that was how Bitcoin was designed by Satoshi to distribute Bitcoin, was you mine it to acquire your Bitcoin. Then Coinbase was the first to open their doors as an easy user experience, and most of the Bitcoin community chose to use Coinbase. And we've since gone on from Coinbase to all sorts of other exchange-based acquisition approaches. But I would actually argue that our Bitcoin community has moved for convenience to exchanges to acquire their Bitcoin. And in the long run, there's been a big question mark that's out there right now about exchange-based liquidity. There may come a point in time, not saying it will, but I personally think it will happen because of how we behave with money and how we tend to hoard the good and spend the bad. But I believe that there will come a point in time where you're going to have to earn your Bitcoin. And the easiest way to earn Bitcoin in a predictive manner is through mining. So I think the way that we've acquired our Bitcoin over time, we went from mining to exchanges, and I believe the arc of history is going to bring us back to mining. And the misconception that I have seen about mining, the primary one, is it's been driven by the mining industry as a whole. We've confused the bejeebus out of people. And what I mean by that is we have people that are looking for a fiat return, and we have people that are looking to acquire Bitcoin. And if you conflate both of those, it equals confusion for the masses. And that's in essence what the mining community has done. So very simply put, if you're a Bitcoiner, mining is the only way that you can generate Bitcoin, right? And as a result, from an acquisition standpoint, the right approach to evaluate a Bitcoin mining opportunity is not an ROI-based opportunity, right? ROI means return on investment. I put dollars in, how long does it take me to get dollars out? You, by default, having that conception about a mining opportunity means that you're looking at it from a fiat mindset. Dollars in, dollars out. The right way to look at it as a Bitcoiner is, are the sats I'm acquiring by mining, are they equal or lesser in value to an exchange where I could go buy those? And I have the upside benefit that I get wild sats as well. Now, one of the things that I want to mention about us as a Bitcoin community having decided to go to exchanges to acquire our Bitcoin is a very important downstream consequence has now arisen. And that is that we've seeded the network itself to fiat hashing, right? Most of the hash rate that is on the network is there primarily to acquire fiat, and it's using Bitcoin as a proxy to do so. And as a result, if you're a fiat hasher, you're not necessarily aligned with the long-term incentives of the network. You may be, but you also may not be. And I'd argue most of the mining centralization issues that we worry and fret and hand-wring about are all because we as a community have decided to go to exchanges to acquire Bitcoin instead of dominating the Bitcoin network with that being our primary way to acquire Bitcoin. And so I think that as much as Ocean is working to decentralize the mining pools, which we love, we're about ready to release that to the public for all of our customers to be able to mine with Ocean through our platform. I think that we actually have a moral incentive as a community to actually take back the network. And I think we see the first impulses with that right now with the BitX community, where people are getting hands-on. It's a terahash, but they have it on their desk and they're having this good experience and feeling like a connection with the network itself. The issue, though, is a BitX is 1 terahash, right? The average Bitcoin miner on the industrial level is 250 times that, right? So it's going to take a god-awful lot of BitXs to get out there. And so that's where a company like ours steps in, and it's like, hey, you can get an industrial-sized mining rig because we're aggregating client purchasing power to get rack space at a low enough energy price that we can get you SATs at a cheaper price than buying them off an exchange. So not only do you get more SATs for your dollar, but you also help to change the equilibrium between fiat hashers and Bitcoin acquisition hashers.
Let me just touch on one of those points there. You said, so the economics actually work out with you guys where it is cheaper for folks to acquire Bitcoin via this, hosting them with you, for example, than it would be for them to just take their fiat to an exchange, buy it. Like you actually have low enough energy costs with where your data centers are that you're able to achieve that. Is that correct?
Yeah. So one of the things that I realized is that analysis, how do you evaluate your cost per Bitcoin, has horribly confused people as well. So the way I looked at it was, how do I get this as simple as possible? So you can go to our website and you can see we've got a little calculator there, and it shows you, okay, based on the mining rigs we offer, how much does it cost for you to run it a day? How many SATs will you generate, right? Because if you know how much hash rate you've got, well, you know how much of the network you're mining. So statistically, this is how many SATs you should receive. If you know those two numbers, you can divide those and see what your price per Bitcoin is. Now, that's a very, very simple analysis. People like to make it much more complicated than that, but that's the core of it. And right now, if you look at that, we call that your daily cost to mine a Bitcoin. We can get people Bitcoin for about $45,000 on our platform. What that doesn't take into account, and be very clear, and there's not trying to be any hand wavy here, is you have to buy a mining rig, and when you're done using that mining rig, you can sell the mining rig. And that piece is what's confused people, is because the price of the mining rig, it fluctuates. And the price at when you can sell that mining rig, it also fluctuates. And how you decide to play that game is up for debate. But what's not up for debate is when you're plugged in and mining, this is what it costs, and this is how much Bitcoin it'll generate. I can tell you that right now. So if you strip all the noise away and just look at that, I've been showing this at different conferences I go to different Bitcoiners. I'm like, hey, do you know this is the daily cost to mine a Bitcoin? And almost without fail, every single one of them is like, are you kidding me? I didn't know that. It's just that very simple idea of comparing to the price on the exchange is not being done by our community. And I think as a result, we're sort of missing the forest for the trees about what mining is, which is an opportunity to acquire Bitcoin, which is how Satoshi designed the network. So to me, it's kind of like we've had this big exodus away from mining, and I think we have to come back to it to actually resolve some of the problems that we've seen on the network.
So on with regard to I get that the your daily cost to mine Bitcoin is, you're saying it's 45,000 versus whatever Bitcoin's at right now, 107, 108. That sounds great. you mentioned obviously that's not taking into account the actual purchase of the rig. So like, and granted, people can sell these rigs at a later time, but do you have any stats on the average amount of time it takes, like the payoff time for one of these rigs? So how far until you're in the black, basically, given that there is an initial capex?
There is capex, and what I see is, so part of what I want to do is to get Bitcoin backed loans to sort of work around that particular argument. But if you look at it, it's okay to take that and break it down. How do you calculate that, right? Are you going, and this is where the complexity comes in because there's no agreed upon way to calculate that. So yeah, you're going to put dollars up front. About 5,000 is kind of a typical number to get a Bitcoin mining rig. So let's say you put 5,000 up front. Well, you're going to be able to sell that at the end. And there's been moments where you can sell that for multiples, but also kind of more standard if you're not hitting that timing right is to sell it for a fraction, right? And so you have that capex that has been spent. Now, how do you calculate your return on that from a dollar standpoint? And the answer is it depends, right? It depends on how you choose to manage the Bitcoin when you acquire it. Are you going to just sit on the Bitcoin, or are you going to sell enough of your Bitcoin to pay your electricity bill? Or are you going to sell only all the Bitcoin to pay your electricity bill, right? There's sort of kind of three gradations there. And depending on that determines how long it takes to pay for the mining rig. That's why for me, I try not to get into that argument. It's there. Absolutely, it is there. But what I find is just the very core value proposition of, hey, this is your daily cost to mine a Bitcoin is just not even understood in our community. And so I'm just trying to get that idea across. And we'll stack on more layers of explanation along the way. So you're right, there is a capex. And I just want to get the core message out before I get too involved with that part of the conversation.
And not trying to have a gotcha at all, just genuinely curious of like, you know, like as somebody who's like interested in this myself, I have my, I need to hook it up. I just, shout out to Average Gary, who I bought this BitAxe from in DC, paid in SATS, of course. Yeah, Gary was nice enough to bring one to DC for me. So that was nice of him. But, you know, I'm curious about this because obviously like, realistically, I'm not going to get an industrial grade miner and plug it in where I live. First of all, the electricity costs are prohibitive where I am. And so it wouldn't make any sense. Like if I was, you know, unless I just really wanted completely KYC-free SATS and I was willing to really burn a lot of my excess value to do so, which like there's an argument to be made for that as well. But on this side, so, you know, through like you mentioned reselling these after, I'm just curious at like the mechanism of that. Do you guys actually facilitate that for your customers? Like, is that something that's easy, or is it like you have to take possession of it and resell it later? Like you know, like when you're done hosting it, what's the actual like what is the shelf life on one of like the, you know, modern kind of, you know, these $5,000 miners that you're talking about? Like how long can they typically run if well maintained?
Yeah, so there's how do I answer? So useful life of a mining rig is not actually what you think. When we think of the useful life of a dishwasher, we think, when is my dishwasher going to stop working and I need to go buy a new one, right? When you think useful life of a mining rig, it's actually less about when it stops working and more about when is it not competitive enough for me to generate enough SATs. And that time frame, it's a bit dicey to say. We use a conservative number, sort of industry average that I've heard is about 4 years. We like to use 3 in our analysis just to be a bit more conservative. But yeah, you're going to get at least 3 years of life is what we say out of a mining rig. And during that time, you know, our approach, again, just trying to be very simple and make very simple approaches to the entire thing is cycle your fiat through your electric bill into a Bitcoin position, hold your Bitcoin, because if you're a Bitcoiner, you know over the course of the next 4 years, you're not going to have anything but upside in that. Now, as far as why you wouldn't want to mine at home, yeah, it's probably so you've got electricity issues, right? Like most people don't realize that the high-end mining rigs these days are about the equivalent of plugging in about 5 microwaves. Most people need to rewire their houses and to be able to handle that sort of electrical consumption in a single device. You've got the noise, which we know is an issue, but probably the biggest issue is, and it's kind of a result of the first two, is the disputes that happen between couples when couples try to mine from home. Genuinely, that has been the biggest thing that I've heard heard a lot of people that are mining with us that used to mine from home will tell us is, hey man, I just had too many arguments with the missus trying to mine out in my garage.
Yeah, the garage gets a little bit deafening, I'm guessing. Unless you're
Yeah.
running some immersion ones, which I suppose you need a little bit more technical chops to be able to keep running. But okay,
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I appreciate you walking through this, and again, not trying to have any gotcha, just trying to like understand better for myself as somebody who's interested in doing this. Are I guess from your side, like, are there any other big misconceptions on the side of Bitcoiners specifically about mining? Or I mean, maybe about like, does some of it come down to like the kind of the dangers of centralization here? I feel like people are starting to get better, or Bitcoiners are starting to get better educated about mining pool centralization risks. But I feel like it's still not even, of all the things that are debated within Bitcoin, this is one that really should be debated a lot and talked about a lot, and still gets hit on the back burner a little bit. I don't know if that's your feeling as
Well,
well.
yeah, I think the more we get the Bitcoin community mining, the healthier the entire community will be. Because if you look at it, the mining community has basically been separate from the rest of the Bitcoin community. Those two groups largely don't talk. I think like Sazmining, I think Ocean, I think we're two of the first entities that really exist that are trying to create a bridge between those two communities. And I think that what we see is because there's been a lot of sort of fiat hashers or fiat service providers in the industry, they've not always treated the Bitcoin community the way they should be, right? And I'm trying to be nice and dance around some of the negatives that have occurred, but as a result, it's sort of left a pockmark on anybody that is trying to help people mine Bitcoin. And what I saw when I got into this, so I had about a decade of experience helping to construct rooftop solar systems, which, I can come back to it, but there's a lot of analogies between solar and Bitcoin mining that are surprising. But what I realized is that nobody was coming in and looking at this properly from the standpoint of, okay, Walker, I'm going to hold on to and manage a piece of property that you own. There is no way for that relationship to be anything other than high trust. Therefore, if I do not optimize around that being a high trust relationship, I'm going to lose, like just straight up. So that's why when we came to the market, we came out the gate and said the only way to build this trust is if we fully align incentives with our client. And that's why we chose not to mark up electricity prices, not mark up the hardware, and instead just pass through our costs on those. And instead we'll take our cut on the back end the same way that our clients do. Because if our clients aren't generating Bitcoin, we're not generating revenue either. So we're going to share the pain and the gain together. And in doing so, like, I can optimize trust.
No, that makes sense. I'm remembering correctly? There have been some other, let's say, like hosted mining services, right? And I'm forgetting which one it was exactly, that may have, like, there were some issues with it in the past. And I'm not trying to dump on anyone here, but like there have been problems with these kind of services because, and again, like everything comes down to incentives, right? So I mean, it's good to hear. I think that like the model that you guys have probably makes the most sense for this, just in terms of like, yeah, you guys are providing a service, people pay for that service. You're not like you're not making your margin on kind of opaque markups of elements of the service you're providing. It's the service itself. Like to me, it's an honest way to run like any business, like, cause if it's anything that's like free, like generally isn't actually free, and you're somehow getting screwed even more on the backside. So at least that's my general experience.
I concur. And if you look at, I mean, you've got only three ways to make money in this business. You can either mark up the hardware, mark up the electricity, or take a share of the Bitcoin out the back end. And every business has got to be paid somehow, otherwise they can't give you the service. And if you look at the first two, if you're going to mark up hardware, does that mean that you're necessarily going to plug the mining machines in? And if that's where the most profit is coming from, are you going to care about how long it takes to plug in the mining machines or how they actually function? If your profit is coming from electricity, are you going to care if you are actually providing hash rate out the back end, or are you just selling electricity? Meaning that if it's broken but still, drawing electricity, do you care? Like, it's still getting your profit in. And so it's only by the alignment of the third one, the block reward, that you can ensure that you are actually aligned with what your client wants, which is why we actually offer a performance guarantee. So if, let's say you've got a 200 terahash machine, right? That the computational power is 200 terahash. We actually guarantee in our data centers that you will receive a certain percentage of that across the course of a year. And the reason we put that in place is because that's actually what our customers care about. They don't care about the actual uptime, whether it's 100% or 90%. They care that they're generating the Bitcoin that their machine can generate, and that's terahash. So we aligned a rig performance guarantee around that to try to also align our incentives even further, because then it's like, okay, not only are we incentivized from this is where our revenue comes from, but now we're also going to promise it. And I don't know if you're not incentivized to generate your revenue the same way, if you would go down the path of then putting a rig performance guarantee in place, because why would you, but we're already there anyway, so why not just take the step?
You think so? We talked a little bit about within the Bitcoin community, but there's obviously a plethora of misconceptions outside of the community. That's it's been driven by a lot of junk science and propaganda, funded by the likes of Ripple, propagated by Greenpeace, mouthed off by Elizabeth Warren, the Alex DeVries of the world. I can name many instances. Been fought by folks like Daniel Batten, Troy Cross, many others. Where do you think we're at right now with the biggest misconceptions about Bitcoin from outside of the Bitcoin industry, from the pre-coiners? Where are we at with that? What are those biggest misconceptions right now in 2025?
So where we are right now is, I think we lost a lot of those people. I think that what I see, so first of all, our product, we market specifically to the Bitcoin community. You need to be pretty far in your journey to be somebody that's looking to acquire Bitcoin and use it as savings, right? And there's a lot of people that are further up in the no coiner, pre-coiner sort of funnel, that they're not looking to acquire Bitcoin and sit on it as savings. So I don't have as many conversations with those people as I probably should. But when I do, the energy FUD, unfortunately, Daniel Batten, Troy Cross, Bob Burnett, we've had a lot of very vocal people who've done a wonderful job of combating it. And I think largely at the academic level, we've done so. But I think it's going to take a very long time for that to filter down to the common man, because unfortunately, just as a species, if you look at it, when there's something new and unknown, our default is to create a fear-based story about it. And that's what happened to our community. Is we were unknown, Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin, and as a result, it was very easy for the incumbent that were disrupting the existing financial system to come out and say, let's prey on this and let's put a lot of FUD out there. And that FUD has imprinted our culture to a large degree. And I think it's going to take a long time for that to be disrupted. It is what it is. It's just sort of an entrenched fight. The conversations like you and I are having, and we could go into how the incentives are there for Bitcoin to be mining with clean energy, and it's becoming better over time. There's lots of data. But at the end of the day, that narrative has planted itself with a lot of people, and they'll come around eventually. But to me, the battle's been won, and it's going to take a long time for people to come around to your average show.
I think that's fair. I mean, just speaking from, as you know, I was in DC last week for the Bitcoin Policy Summit, and was talking to some staffers, and they quite literally were raising the most cliched Bitcoin mining FUD that you can imagine, and another set of staffers raising incredibly cliched AML KYC FUD. Also some of they're not say they're all bad. Many asked very good questions from a place of genuine curiosity and saying, "Look, I don't understand how what this is," or even can you explain the difference between Bitcoin and crypto, because I honestly don't get it. That's great when you get honest questions where it's someone's genuinely wanting to learn. But you can also see, to your point, how even though at the academic level, it's becoming an untenable position to say Bitcoin mining wastes energy, right? That's if you're doing any sort of decent academic work, you just make yourself look like an idiot by saying that. But the average person, even the average staffer in DC or the average, senator or congressperson in DC, they're not even close to there yet. And the average citizen is still not close to that. And so it's like, man, it's tough because it's like we've won the battle on one side, but the other side doesn't even know that the battle like has been won, or they just don't even care about it. It's like, so I don't know if it matters, but I would like to get in, because one of the things I talked about in DC when some of these staffers were asking about or bringing up some of this mining FUD was like, look, and they were staffers of a Democratic, congressperson. And so I was like, okay, what angle do I hit him with? Well, obviously, look, you care about renewable energy, right? Well, Bitcoin mining is the most renewably powered industry in the entire planet, like by a long shot. Like, see, it's a good thing. It's not what you've heard. Where do you think we're at with that, or can you talk a little bit about how that narrative has really proven? Can we talk about the incentives really of, does Bitcoin mining facilitate this renewable build out as many have posited?
Yes, simple answer. And the reason why is because because the incentives are there, right? And so I think that's actually one of like the secret superpowers of Bitcoiners. Is we have the ability to follow incentives and see the likely outcome. I just, without fail, almost every Bitcoiner I know has that capability. And what you can see with mining is that it is no different, right? Like, Bitcoin miners want the cheapest electricity they can find. What's the cheapest electricity you can find? It's the electricity that people don't want. And why do we produce electricity that nobody really wants? Well, it's because it's produced in the wrong time, or the wrong location, or a combination of both, right? And so, okay, let's peel the onion one more layer. Well, what energy sources are doing that? Well, it's a lot of times hydro is not geographically located right next to the city that's going to consume it. Or you've got wind and solar, right? So you look at those three energy sources, and then off-grid flared gas, right? That one gets a little more complicated, but it's actually carbon negative when you break down that argument. And when you look at it across the board, there's just all this energy out there that's produced at the wrong time in the wrong place, and it's all carbon neutral to negative. And so naturally, Bitcoin miners are going to gravitate to consuming that electricity because the network drives them to increase their profit margins by driving down their electricity costs. So it's not a surprise that the network is getting cleaner and cleaner. It's actually a surprise that people are surprised that the network is as clean as it is.
Yeah, it's honestly like amazing, the stuff around either landfill, like landfill gas, methane, or just flared gas broadly, I think is one of the most fascinating sides of things. Just because it's like, once you learn about that, it's like you look really silly for trying to be against something like that. And there's that, I forget who was the first person to say it. It may have been Gladstein. It could have been someone else. But the whole idea that if you're not mining Bitcoin, you're wasting energy. Like, one, it's true. And two, it's like, it's really satisfying to see that thesis start to permeate a little more. You see, like, speaking of hydro, I think that's what the Kingdom of Bhutan has been using, right? Is hydropower to mine a shocking amount of Bitcoin with energy that would otherwise have been wasted. At the same time, you've got the United Kingdom, which is curtailing like billions or at least over $1 billion worth of energy per year, and passing the cost of that curtailment onto the taxpayer, who already has high energy bills. They have high energy bills, but they're paying people to shut down their energy production. That's just nuts. Like, that is so insane. Like, your energy should be way, way, way cheaper. Your energy should be almost free at this point. But no, because you have a terribly managed system that apparently won't come around to Bitcoin mining, you're literally having people spend more money just to run energy into the ground. Like that just blows my mind. I'm sure you, as somebody in the industry, that's like probably even more aggravating to you than it is to me.
Yes, and I think I've just developed a thicker skin around it or more patience around it because so this is going to sound odd. I learned this lesson in rooftop solar. So I'll give you an anecdote that still to this day I find mind-boggling. But I was selling rooftop solar and I had, these were house appointments I was going to, and literally across the street from one another, two homes. It was a housing development complex, and so the homes were identical, just straight cookie cutter homes. I went into one house and it had an electric bill, and this is circa 2010, right? So I'm dating myself here, but had like a $50 a month electric bill in California. I went into the house across the street. It was about $450, and that homeowner in this home sat there and scratched his head. He's like, I know my neighbor has a very low electric bill and I can't figure it out. The only thing I do are turn on these few switches each day, and I okay, what are the switches for? Well, one powers my air conditioning, and I notice it's like a 95-degree day outside and it's 55 in his house. Okay, that's using a lot of electricity. What's the other one? Oh yeah, that runs my pool. And oh yeah, the other one is a tanning booth that I have back there. I like to tan, right? And this guy had no conception that the number of switches he was flipping does not correlate to the electricity he's consuming. And it occurred to me at that point, I was like, oh, when human beings can't see something, a lot of us can't understand it. Just straight up. We have no clue. And so when it comes to electricity, it fits in this box where it's like a mystical substance, I think, for most people. And I think for a lot of us as Bitcoiners that are sort of like retethered ourselves to reality as we get hard money going in our lives and start, extending our time horizons and thinking about saving for our families and for our futures. Like we're just getting grounded and back to reality. The Nixon gold shock, I think, just untethered society, and the Bitcoiners are the first one that are getting grounded. And we see this stuff and it just seems so dead obvious. But to most people that are just running around helter-skelter, they're just judging their electricity consumption by how many switches they flip. They think electricity is stored and can't be wasted. I mean, just the basic fact that electricity, the grid, is a circuit. You use it or you lose it. That is just how the grid works. There's no storage mechanism, right? So if they're pushing all this power in, it's not being used. The rest has got to go to ground somewhere in the system. So just like how the grid itself functions, how electricity functions, like all of this is absolutely just over most people's heads, and Bitcoiners are coming to realize what this stuff is and be like, you guys are crazy. Like, you just don't understand, and you're making the decisions on how the grid works, what electricity price. I mean, can we at least get back to the laws of physics for our reality?
I mean, I'm sorry, I just got to touch back on this guy because so he was legitimately thinking like there's like a one-to-one relationship. Like every switch that I flip is just using the same. Like, it doesn't matter what that switch turns on. It's just like, that's just using my 1 unit of electricity. Like that. I mean, wow.
Yeah. No,
that is
genuinely.
mind blowing.
The most surprising part was I managed not to laugh in his face. Because it was, it was rough.
Honestly.
It was rough. I had to really snort that chuckle.
Dear Lord. I mean, that's like, it is just indicative of the fact that most people they don't think that hard about most things. Like even the things that really affect them and affect their bottom line on a daily basis, they're not that curious about them. They just can't be bothered to care or to understand, or maybe don't have the capacity to understand. But like, you don't have to have too much mental capacity to understand that, a little tiny light bulb is going to use less electricity than heating your pool, for example. Like that, that's mind blowing. So, okay. A lot of people, granted, are still going to have strange, incorrect, preconceived notions about Bitcoin mining for a very long time. Where do you think we're at from a nation state or governmental level? I know you're not in the U.S. anymore, but obviously you keep tabs on that closely. The world is a big place. We mentioned the Kingdom of Bhutan earlier. There's other governments who are also mining Bitcoin, whether in broad daylight or behind closed doors. Where do you think we're at from kind of a nation state mining perspective? Do you think this is something that's increasingly just becoming kind of a necessity for countries to pay attention to? Or do you think that a lot of them are still kind of asleep at the wheel like the average person is? Because let's be honest, governments are mostly run by average people with higher levels of psychopathy than the general population, if to put it kindly.
Yeah, to put it kindly. I think nation states are going to focus on a lot more than your average Joe. Unfortunately, and this is, it saddens me to say this, to be completely frank with you, Walker, but I think the retail that is in now is one end of the barbell, and I think institutions and nation states are the other. And I think that that's going to absorb most of the supply. And I think all the retail that have not adopted Bitcoin at this point, or have started their stacking journey, I think they're not going to be starting until after it's socially accepted. And that really is rough to sort of come to accept. But I've just seen in the conversations, I think the biggest inflection point for me was just watching how everybody in the community got excited about us crossing 100K for the first time. I think for so many of us, we thought that was going to be a psychological tipping point for all of our friends and family to say, look, Walker, you were right. I was wrong. I'm going to start stacking Bitcoin now. And that didn't happen for any of us. And the fact that didn't happen for any of us is a sign that I just don't think that there's a number that will happen. There's no capitulation point for retail, as I think a lot of us have imagined and wished for. But I do think that there is a capitulation point, and it is occurring for nation states. And I think I think the money printer and the ownership of the dominant money printer is the equivalent of Game of Thrones for our species. And we've been fighting over that money printer for so bloody long that to see a new entrance in the ring at a nation state level, it has the leading contenders vying for it now, and I think it's a game that none of us are really going to understand until history books are written about it 100 years later. But I do believe that we're starting to see the nation state adoption curve playing itself out at this point. I don't understand exactly where it's going to go or what that means, but I think we've well moved past the retail period of accumulation.
I mean, safe to say you're of the opinion that hash rate you would view as, or countries will increasingly start to view as, like a strategic geopolitical priority.
I think so. And I don't think that, I mean, do you know many government programs that are run all that well?
Some militaries.
Military's about it, right? And so I'm thinking,
Yeah.
okay, you know how to run military. Is mining all that close to military? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't know how it plays out, but I think it's going to be a long time before the mining industry gets subsumed by the nation state mining play. And it's just for that simple reason. It takes, like I could see being subcontracted, right? Where maybe Trump goes to some of the pubcos and says, hey, boys, we want to contract you to go monetize all this electricity for us that we're subsidizing with our money printer, and we want all the Bitcoin for it. I could see that happening. But as far as propping it up and building their own like branch of the military for mining at this point, I think we got some years ahead of us, just given the pace at which government gets good at doing things.
Talk a little bit more about mining pool centralization, because we touched on it a little bit earlier. You guys mentioned that you're going to start allowing redirect, or to people to direct their hash power to Ocean. Can you talk about this just for folks who may not be super familiar with why this is such an important thing, and maybe because a lot of people just may not know about it. Maybe they haven't seen that chart showing, it's a pretty scary chart to look at when you see that, like 3 entities control, whatever high, like 70% of the hash rate. Like it's very centralized from a mining pool perspective. And to me, I view this as like a massive risk that should be paid attention to. I think there are also some solutions in place for alleviating some of that stress. And, but the first step is like make people aware of the problem. So what should people know about pool centralization and its effects?
Yeah, I think first of all, excuse me. I think first of all, people should be aware that Bitmain is the 900-pound gorilla in the room on the network, right? Not only do they have the lion's share of the hash rate that they're selling for hardware, but they're also running AMP pool that is a proxy for several other mining pools, and that was just discovered recently, right? So not only are they selling the hardware, not only they're mining, but they're also controlling a lot of blocks and the block templates that are being made and pushed out there, right? And so to me, the fact that we have that level of centralization risk with one actor is the ultimate issue more than anything. So yes, if you add up, I think it's Foundry plus AMP pool plus there's one other sort of is the grouping that people worry about. It's less that particular grouping that I worry about and the impact that Bitmain has across the entire ecosystem, because the CCP can come in at any time and say there's a throat to choke at Bitmain, right? That's what we always worry about within the Bitcoin community, right? And so because that threat exists, it could be utilized, and I think that we should be mitigating that, and we should be mitigating it by having different mining hardware that's available. And I'm the pot calling the kettle black, right? We sell a lot of Bitmain equipment, so it's not that I'm anti a Bitmain specifically, as I am the undue size influence that they have on the network. So to me, that's the biggest concern I have. And Bitdeer is coming to market with new mining rigs. Aerodyne is coming to market with new mining rigs. So those are all wonderful things on the hardware level. On the mining pool level, Ocean is the most dominant hype or opportunity we've got to decentralize there. Demand is another mining pool that's coming to market that's using Stratum v2. So Datum and Stratum v2 are two protocols by which block templates are put back in the miner's hands to generate their own blocks. And if you're not generating your own blocks, then in essence you're ceding that right to somewhere else in the mining pool. And I think what we're going to see as a Bitcoin community is that we're going to start to see the mining pool turned into like a stack, right? Where we're going to start to see that you generate hash rate generates a certain number of shares that you're going to be rewarded for when a mining pool finds a block, but that pool is going to be kind of an accounting function and a distribution function, and there may even be like a different layer. There's going to be a different layer. That's where Datum and Stratum v2 are for where the block is being created, and then where the block actually gets propagated through. Like, I think it's going to get a lot more complicated, and that's actually a good thing for the entire network, because it'll de-risk the centralization impacts. So I think to your point, Walker, the fact that we're all so focused on it and awareness is growing around this issue is the starting point. There's not too many issues that we focus on as a Bitcoin community that we don't see progress on. This one is harder than a lot of others, though, because it involves moving molecules around meat space, right? It's not just software and code that can fix things. It's like we actually have to move electricity around and point hardware to a certain place and all that. So it's going to happen. The focus is there. But yeah, for me, the two big risks that I see to the network are mining centralization, of which I think Sazmining has some impact on it to change the incentive set on why people are mining. But downstream of that, I also quantum attacks are the other one that concern me. And so, as much as we've been arguing about things like op return, which I think there's a legitimate, interesting debate there, I actually think that it's the wrong debate and wrong use of our community's focus. I would much prefer to see all of us working together to solve the mining centralization issues and like the quantum issues that seem to be heading down the pike at us.
Let's touch on the quantum thing for a sec then, because I mean, the way I see it, it's like, okay, if we do get to that point, I feel like this is often something that's used as like a gotcha for Bitcoin. Well, what's going to happen to Bitcoin when, a quantum computer can just crack it, and, then all your little bitty coins will belong to the quantum computer. It's like, okay, like if that happens and if it can, if it's able to break that level of encryption, well, then that means it's breaking all the encryption everywhere in the world. Like everything. So like, probably the bigger issue is that literally everything everywhere will shut down, and we're going to descend into chaos. And it won't matter if you have Bitcoin, because the only currency that anyone will care about is ammunition. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Bitcoin is uniquely vulnerable. I don't know. I see it as one of those things where, like, yeah, could this be a problem in the future? Absolutely. Am I also confident that we have ways in which to protect from that quantum threat, and that Bitcoiners are probably more aware of that than folks in a lot of other industries also using strong encryption? Yes. So I'm curious where you sit on that. How much of a threat do you realistically think that is, and is that threat insurmountable?
So I think that having a technology that's a store of value makes you uniquely vulnerable, not from the technology itself, but from people's perceptions of that technology. The fact that we hear it so much, I actually think limits our adoption, because people's fear of that, whether true or not, back to what we were talking about earlier, if there's something they don't understand, then it becomes a boogeyman to get scared about, right? And I think that that's probably playing itself out. So for me, I'm in your camp, actually. I'm not that worried about it. For me, though, it's important that we as a community create a game plan and know when to deploy that game plan. And the fact that we don't have an agreed upon game plan at this point, and know when we plan to deploy it, that's my issue. And maybe it's just because I did Boy Scouts as a kid and have it drilled into me to be prepared, but that seems to me to be just an obvious, like, dumb thing. Like, we know quantum's coming. We know at some point it does pose a risk for us. Why don't we have an agreed game plan in place? And why don't we focus on agreeing on that game plan as one of our priorities right now? Because we know it's an actual risk when it occurs. A lot of these things, like the op return debate, a lot of it's just throwing around theoreticals on what if this happens and that happens. And, I think the great fear around the op return debate was, well, miners are going to centralize and we're going to have all sorts of problems in the future. And it's like, yeah, maybe. We don't really know. There's no counterfactual to that. It could happen, it might not, but we know as soon as quantum technology is at a certain point, whether people choose to or not, it could be pointed at Bitcoin addresses and used to break those. So, like, that is just a hard fact, right? So let's just be prepared and get a game plan together we agreed to.
And if not, then we've got a quantum resistant fork and a non-quantum resistant fork, and we'll see what happens there. That's one thing that's clear. It's consensus is rough and messy when it comes to Bitcoin. But okay, well, Ken, we've covered a lot today. Was there anything that we did not get a chance to dive into? Anything you wanted to go deeper on, or anything we didn't get a chance to cover that you want to take a few minutes to go into?
Nah, man. I think if my instinct is to go to just shill what I'm doing with my project, but I'm not going to anymore.
Yeah, man, go for it.
We've already talked
and
about
thanks
it.
for sharing your time.
I think if anything, I just say that if you've been shafted by hosting, or if you have been very negative towards it in the past, I would say, we're Bitcoiners building a Bitcoin project, and we're Bitcoin only. I'm pretty proud of the fact that we've got, like, very simple things, but have been very hard to come by in our industry. We've got, like, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Cash App, Lightning, Bitcoin, Tether, like all, like, the major rails we've got available. We've done a lot of cool things that can only be done if you have a software forward approach to mining. And I think you're going to be shocked with the experience if you give it a second look. And I get why you've rejected it. And I know I'm speaking to the audience at writ large right here, but I get why so many Bitcoiners have rejected it, because the trust has just been abused. And we set out at Sazmining to restore that trust, because fundamentally we should be acquiring our Bitcoin. And I know I'm being moralistic here, but we should be acquiring our Bitcoin the way Satoshi designed the network, because it's a better acquisition method. We should not be going to the exchange-based surveillance system to acquiring our Bitcoin. And if we go back to the network, retake the network, so to speak, I think a lot of our problems are going to disappear.
I like that. I like that message, and I think it's a great note to end on. Where do you want to send people?
So website is sazmining.com. You can find me on Twitter at K Halliburton, so 2 L's in Halliburton. DMs are open. Hit me up.
And you are getting back on Nostr.
I am on Nostr too, but I just
yeah?
don't know how to. I don't know how to share my Nostr in pub very successfully.
That's okay. I'll blast it out to folks once this episode goes live, so they can find it on mine. Well, Kent, appreciate you sharing your scarce time, and looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Likewise. Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this Bitcoin Talk episode of the Bitcoin Podcast. Remember to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're watching or listening, and share it with your friends, family, and strangers on the internet. Find me on Nostr at primal.net/Walker and this podcast at primal.net/Titcoin. On X, YouTube, and Rumble, just search at Walker America. And find this podcast on X and Instagram at Titcoin Podcast. Head to the show notes to grab sponsor links. Head to substack.com/@WalkerAmerica to get episodes emailed to you. And head to bitcoinpodcast.net for everything else. Bitcoin is scarce, but podcasts are abundant. So thank you for spending your scarce time listening to the Bitcoin Podcast. Until next time, stay free.